The bunker on Europa was about as glamorous as a coffin, minus the comfortable finality. Commander Tyvian Kane surveyed the ragtag bunch of idealists and opportunists who called themselves humanity's last defense, the crack legal team. They were elbow-deep in grimy paperwork, the kind that recycled endlessly through a bureaucracy that made Earth's DMV look like a well-oiled machine. "All right, you lot," Kane growled, flicking a stray piece of space dust off his tattered uniform. "Who's ready to tell the Alarian Consortium where they can shove their intergalactic law?" "With all due respect, sir," piped up Jessamir, the team's sharp-tongued litigator, "they're not the sort to take no for an answer, even if you draw them a diagram." Her eyes were a steely gray, like the color of a storm that had given up raining and decided to just be pissed off. Kane chuckled, a sound like gravel grinding in an engine. "Good thing we brought crayons." The bunker thrummed with the dull hum of ancient tech struggling to stay relevant. Holoscreens flickered, displaying legal precedents from civilizations long turned to dust. A persistent drip echoed somewhere in the corner, the universe's way of reminding them that even underground, water was a constant pain in the ass. "I've seen more life in a graveyard." That was Parnell, the resident cynic with a knack for finding the downside in any situation, like a bloodhound sniffing out existential dread. "A graveyard's where we're headed if we don't win this," Jessamir shot back, unfazed. Kane leaned over the holomap of the galaxy, its borders glowing like an interstellar rash. "Earth's a pimple on the Alarian Consortium's backside." "They want to pop it," he paused, letting the image settle. "And not because we're pretty," Parnell snorted. "They think we're breaking intergalactic law by just existing." Kane nodded. "Pretty much. It's like being evicted because they don't like your face." "Well," Jessamir said, cracking her knuckles, "they'll find out humans have a knack for sticking around, even when we shouldn't." The team gathered around the pile of dubious legal documents, scrap paper from the mightiest civilizations, each one a testament to how not to get vaporized. "What's our angle, Jess?" Kane asked, leaning back, trying to ignore the persistent creak of his chair that might just be a metaphor for this whole operation. "We play the ancient Earth artifact card," she replied, tapping a gauntlet-covered finger on a particularly dusty tome. "We argue cultural heritage. Alarian law respects that." Parnell rolled his eyes, the heavy sigh of a man who'd seen his fair share of wild proposals. "You mean the laws they wrote when they were still figuring out what side of the airlock to stand on?" "Precisely," Jessamir grinned, a predator spotting the prey's Achilles heel. "They are old laws. Probably thought they'd never have to use them, like those emergency pants you keep in your locker. Hey, those pants saved my ass. And this argument will save Earth's." Kane stood, stretching the stiffness from his bones, a reminder that even in zero-G, age was a stubborn bastard. "All right, let's make them regret ever thinking humans wouldn't read the fine print." He turned to the rest of the team, a motley crew of legal minds from across the solar system, each more eccentric than the last. "You've got your briefs, you've got your laws. Now's the time to make them dance like a cat on a hot tin roof." "Or a lawyer in a courtroom with no pants," Parnell added, earning a collective groan. "Whatever works," Kane shrugged. "Just remember this isn't just about Earth. We're the underdogs in a galaxy that thinks we're only good for manual labor and mediocre entertainment." "And karaoke," Jessamir reminded them. "Right," Kane conceded. "But this is our chance to prove we can hold our own in a universe that wishes we'd just go away." The team nodded, and for a brief moment, a sense of purpose flickered in the stale air of the bunker. The door to the bunker slid open with a screech that announced its presence like an old man clearing his throat. In walked Dr. Ilara Maelstrom, the brain behind their operation, juggling a stack of reports that looked older than Europa itself. "I trust you're all ready for the big dance." "Ready as we'll ever be," Kane replied, though the truth was they'd never be truly ready for what awaited them in the interstellar court. "No pressure," Ilara said, setting the reports down with a thud. "Just the fate of humanity resting on your shoulders." "No biggie," Kane smirked. Just another Tuesday. Well, Ilara said, her voice dripping with sardonic cheer, let's make sure we're not the punchline in the galaxy's longest-running joke. The lights flickered, momentarily plunging the room into darkness. Kane let out a low growl. I swear, if those lights go out one more time, I'm suing the power company for emotional distress. Add it to the list, Jessamir quipped. In the dim glow of emergency lights, Kane wondered if this was humanity's final stand. A bunch of misfits and outcasts trying to hold back the tide of alien bureaucracy with little more than wit, sarcasm, and an unhealthy dose of optimism. Let's get to it, he said, and with a resigned sigh, they returned to the task at hand. Saving Earth from becoming nothing more than a footnote in the annals of interstellar history. You know, Parnell said, leaning back with a grin, if we pull this off, drinks are on me. If we don't, Kane replied, you'll wish you'd spent that money on a coffin. The team laughed, a sound that echoed off the cold metal walls, a brief moment of camaraderie in the face of impending doom. And in that laughter there was a stubborn defiance, a refusal to bow to the inevitable. Because humanity was nothing if not stubborn, and as long as they were still breathing, there was always a chance, no matter how slim, to flip the script and come out on top. The universe might not expect much from them, but damn it, that was exactly why they'd win. As the laughs faded, replaced by the familiar rustle of papers and the soft tap of keys, Kane allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. All right, he said, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Let's go show those Alarians why you don't mess with Earth. And so, with a grim determination fueled by dark humor and a shared sense of purpose, humanity's unlikely defenders set about preparing for the galaxy's most absurd trial, hoping against hope that somewhere in the chaos, they'd find a way to tip the scales in their favor. Hey, Jess, Parnell called out just as the tension started to build again. Yeah, think we can get the Alarians to cover our legal fees if we win, Jessamir laughed, a bright sound that cut through the gloom. If we win, Parnell, they'll be the ones needing a lawyer. Kane couldn't help but smile, a rare expression that felt almost alien on his face. Let's get to it, team, he said, feeling the weight of the universe settling comfortably on his shoulders like an old, unwelcome friend. The bunker thrummed with renewed energy, the scent of stale coffee mingling with determination, the air crackling with a tension that was equal parts excitement and dread. Remember, Kane added as they prepared to dive back into the madness, we're the underdogs, but that just means we've got more to prove. And with that, the team plunged back into their work, driven by the knowledge that the fate of Earth, and perhaps more importantly, their own human pride, depended on their success. The interstellar court might not know what hit it, but then again, neither did the humans. And that, in a strange, bleakly humorous way, was precisely why they had a fighting chance. Kane took a deep breath, glancing around at the faces of those who'd become like family in this bizarre, high-stakes game. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. Let's go, he said, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, there was hope in his voice, a small, stubborn ember that refused to be snuffed out. Because in the end, no matter how dark things seemed, there was always a chance, a slim, improbable chance, that the universe would finally realize just how much it underestimated humanity. And that, Kane mused, was the greatest joke of all. The interstellar court was a marvel of alien over-engineering, a structure as needlessly complex as a politician's apology. Tyvian Kane and his ragtag legal mavericks had barely set foot inside when they were bombarded by the sheer absurdity of it all. The courtroom itself was a circular chamber, walls lined with iridescent panels that pulsed with the rhythm of some alien heartbeat, as if the building itself was mocking them with its vitality. Magistrate Vorath, the Alarian prosecutor, was already in position, floating insouciantly in the zero-G environment like an overgrown jellyfish with delusions of grandeur. His robes shimmered with the gaudy luminescence of a disco ball, casting patterns on the walls that were less courtroom dignity and more interstellar dance party. Esteemed members of the court, Voreth began, the translator implant in Kane's ear turning the flowery alien tongue into something resembling English with a superiority complex. We stand at a pivotal juncture in intergalactic governance. Humanity, unpredictable, chaotic, and prone to existential crises, poses an unparalleled threat to the stability of the cosmos. Kane snorted softly. Nice to know we're leaving a lasting impression, he murmured, earning a sideways glance from Jessamir. SHH, she hissed. Let the jellyfish dig its own hole. Vorath continued, undeterred by the humans' lack of decorum. Their history is rife with conflict and destruction. They have repeatedly demonstrated their inability to adhere to intergalactic norms, preferring instead to indulge in their primitive passions and flawed logic. Primitive passions, Parnell muttered, raising an eyebrow. Is it just me, or does that sound like something you'd read on a cheap romance novel? Shut up, Parnell, Jessamir said, though her lips twitched into a smile. Vorath's presentation was a tapestry of doom, highlighting every calamity humanity had ever concocted. He cited wars, environmental disasters, and the occasional mass extinction event, each presented as evidence of humanity's inherent risk to galactic peace. Impressive, Parnell whispered. They managed to make us sound like the universe's most misunderstood rock band. Kane rubbed the bridge of his nose, trying to focus over the chatter. Keep it down. We're not going to win this by being the class clowns. Could have fooled me, Parnell whispered back, but he quieted down nonetheless. The Alarians had made their point abundantly clear. Humanity was the unruly neighbor in a peaceful cul-de-sac of stars. And now, it was Tyvian Kane's turn to convince the court that this rabble of misfits was worth keeping around. Now, Team Earth, Voreth concluded, with a sneer that transcended species, present your defense. Kane stood, wishing for the 100th time that holoscreens didn't have the emotional range of a doorknob. Thank you, Magistrate Vorath, for that stirring rendition of our greatest hits. Jessamir stepped up beside him, all confidence and sharp edges. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the Alarians' dedication to intergalactic law. Truly, it takes a species with an inordinate amount of free time to create a system this convoluted. Vorath's eye stalks twitched, a sign, Kane hoped, of irritation. Your flattery is noted, human. Proceed with your argument. Jessamir didn't miss a beat. Humanity, unpredictable as we are, has brought innovation and diversity to the galaxy. Our cultural artifacts, our stories, our very existence enriches the fabric of interstellar society. Parnell leaned over to Kane, whispering, She's laying it on thicker than a zero-G gravy. Kane nodded, doing his best to appear attentive. She knows what she's doing. And let's not forget, Jessamir continued, that Earth's cultural heritage, our art, music, and literature, represents a significant contribution to galactic history. Vorath's eye stalks narrowed. A contribution, perhaps, but worth the risk. Kane cleared his throat. We've got a plan, Vorath. We'll comply with intergalactic norms, starting with an interstellar diplomatic outreach program. Parnell scoffed quietly. Or, as we call it, let's hope they don't blow us up before we can say hello. That's right, Jessamir added, ignoring Parnell's commentary. We propose a cultural exchange, starting with legal systems. Your laws, while comprehensive, might benefit from a bit of Earth's legal flair. We're quite good at riding loopholes. Vorath seemed to consider this, his gelatinous form undulating thoughtfully. A proposal with potential. However, you must first demonstrate your understanding of our legal framework. This was the moment Kane had been dreading. Navigating the labyrinthine legal system of the Alarians was like trying to explain quantum physics to a toddler with a sugar high. We've been studying, Kane said, hoping his voice sounded steadier than he felt. But it's like trying to read a map written in disappearing ink. The court, filled with representatives of various alien species, murmured with a sound like distant thunder. Jessamir glanced over at Kane, her expression unreadable. You've got this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kane nodded, taking a deep breath. The Alarian legal system is extensive, he started, careful to choose his words like a man defusing a bomb. But Earth has a long history of dealing with complex legal issues. We can adapt. Vorath's eye stalks wobbled, a sign, Kane assumed, of skepticism. Adaptation requires understanding, Commander Kane. Explain how you intend to integrate your systems with IORs. Well, Kane said, buying time, we'll start by cross-referencing your intergalactic precedents with our own. We've got holoscreens full of records from countless civilizations, most of which ended in a fiery cataclysm, Parnell muttered. Shut it, Kane said, through gritted teeth. And we'll ensure Earth abides by your laws. Vorath let out a low hum, a sound that could have been contemplation or indigestion. Very well, but know this, the Alarian Consortium does not tolerate failure. Kane bristled but managed to maintain his composed facade. Neither do we. We'll prove Earth deserves a place in this galaxy. There was a pause, a silence so profound it seemed to suck the air from the room. Kane could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on him, like a leaden cloak designed by a particularly sadistic tailor. Jessamir broke the silence with a smile sharper than a laser scalpel. And as for the unpredictable nature of humanity, well, that's just part of our charm. Vorath's eye stalks flickered, and Kane could have sworn he saw a flicker of amusement. Charm is hardly a legal defense, Vorath countered, though there was a note of reluctant admiration in his voice. Then how about determination? Kane said, his voice rising. We may be unpredictable, but we never give up. We'll fight for our place here, no matter how many rules we have to learn. The courtroom was silent as the implication settled like a thick fog. Parnell leaned over again, his voice low with faux gravity. In other words, sorry, we're stubborn as hell. The Alarian prosecutor shifted, a ripple of irritation passing through his gelatinous form. Let us see if your actions can match your words, Commander Kane. The court remains adjourned until the next proceeding. Kane nodded, feeling the tension in his shoulders begin to unwind. See you then, Vorath. We'll be ready. As they exited the courtroom, the team's bravado slowly gave way to the grim reality of their situation. The Alarian legal system was a beast unlike any they'd faced before, and the stakes were higher than they'd ever imagined. We're in over our heads, Jessamir said quietly, as they filed into the cramped confines of their makeshift office in the bunker. This isn't just about getting Earth off the hook. It's about proving we can play their game. Parnell threw himself into a chair, his expression one of weary resignation. At least we've got a few tricks up our sleeves. If Jessamir's charm doesn't work, maybe we can baffle them with B.S. Kane managed a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. Whatever it takes. We're not going down without a fight. The team fell into a familiar rhythm, sifting through the endless reams of data, trying to make sense of the tangled web of laws that defined the Alarian Consortium. Each piece of information was a potential lifeline, a fragile thread that might tip the scales in their favor. The bunker thrummed with activity, the ancient tech struggling valiantly to keep up with their frantic pace. Holoscreens flickered, displaying dense legal jargon that could fry a human's brain faster than a plasma charge. As the IORs wore on, Kane found himself staring at the same paragraph for the third time, the words blurring together into an indecipherable mess. He rubbed his eyes, trying to banish the fatigue that clung to him like a second skin. We can do this, Jessamir said, her voice steady and reassuring. We've got history on our side. Not to mention a knack for finding loopholes, Parnell added with a weary grin. Kane nodded, though he couldn't quite shake the nagging doubt that sat like lead in his stomach. They were fighting an uphill battle, armed with little more than their wits and a stubborn refusal to be written off. But if there was one thing humanity had always been good at, it was defying the odds. And as long as there was a chance, a slim, improbable chance, they'd find a way to survive. All right, team, Kane said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. Let's get back to it. We've got a galaxy to save. and as they dove back into the chaos, driven by the shared determination to prove their worth, Kane couldn't help but hope that somewhere out there, the universe was finally ready to give humanity a break. They say a trial is like a game of chess. In this case, it felt more like trying to win a chess game on a rickety table in a zero-G bar fight, with pieces flying and someone constantly questioning if the king should have that many legs. Kane strode back into the courtroom, where the iridescent panels blinked with all the warmth of a malfunctioning microwave. Around him, alien representatives loomed, some tall, some gelatinous, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else but here. "All right," Kane muttered to his team, "time to play the next hand in this interstellar poker game. Let's hope we're not the ones going bust." Jessamir, standing beside him with a look that could melt tungsten, nodded. "And remember, don't show them fear. They're like dogs, they'll just sense it and pounce." "Or like tax collectors," Parnell interjected. "But with tentacles." Kane suppressed a grin. "Good point. Keep your guard up." As they took their places, Magistrate Vorath's gelatinous form shimmered under the courtroom lights, resembling a lava lamp that had seen better days. He cleared his throat with a sound like someone stepping on a wet sponge. "Team Earth, present your next argument." Kane stood, trying to exude confidence, while inside he felt about as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. "Your Honor, we'd like to present to the court a demonstration of human history to highlight our unique perspective." Vorath's eye stalks twitched with the excitement of a slug contemplating a foggy day. "Proceed." With a nod, Jessamir activated the holoscreen, and centuries of human advancement flickered into view: wars, revolutions, the invention of the spork, all the greatest hits. "As you can see," Kane narrated, "our history is a tapestry, series of contradictions. We've made art from war, peace from conflict, and occasionally toast from chaos." Parnell snorted, barely stifling laughter. "More like burnt toast, right?" The holoscreen paused on an image of a nuclear explosion, the colors vibrant and horrifying. The room went silent, the kind of silence that comes before a really bad joke or an unexpected fart in an elevator. Vorath shifted uneasily. "This display is meant to instill confidence in your species." "More like bewilderment," Jessamir said, a sly grin on her lips. "Humans thrive on paradoxes. We solve problems by creating more, and somehow it works out in the end." Vorath's eye stalks narrowed in suspicion, like a teacher trying to figure out if a student was cheating or just really bad at math. "Paradoxes." Kane leaned in, sensing an opportunity. "Exactly. Our unpredictability isn't a flaw, it's our strength. It's how we've survived against all odds. We're like a cat, drop us and we'll land on our feet most of the time." Parnell leaned over, muttering, "and sometimes in the neighbor's backyard, covered in dirt." The holoscreen shifted, showing moments of human ingenuity. The moon landing, the creation of the internet, the invention of cheese in a can. The Alarian representatives wobbled, their forms expressing a mix of confusion and mild horror. "This is the essence of humanity," Jessamir continued, her tone almost reverent if you squinted hard enough. "We take the messiest of situations and find a way to survive. We're chaos incarnate, and yet here we are." The Alarians murmured among themselves, like a choir of disgruntled bees. Vorath's gelatinous form rippled with what might have been frustration or a really strong itch. "And you believe this?" "Chaos is a boon to the galaxy?" Vorath asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "It's what makes us adaptable," Kane replied, trying to sound wise, like some ancient sage who'd spent too much time in self-imposed exile. "We bring a fresh perspective to the galactic stage." Parnell snickered. Like yelling fire in a crowded theater, the room buzzed with tension, the kind that precedes either a breakthrough or a breakdown. Kane watched Vorath's reaction closely, hoping their gambit wasn't as crazy as it sounded. Vorath's eye stalks wobbled, each sway a little dance of alien doubt. Curious, yet chaos in itself is not a strategy. "It's not just chaos," Jessamir interjected, her voice sharp as a laser cutter. "It's creativity born from chaos. We've found solutions to problems that others couldn't even fathom." Parnell nodded sagely. Like how to cure a hangover with ingredients found only under the sink. Kane stifled a laugh, keeping his focus on Vorath. Exactly. Our ability to think outside the proverbial box, or in our case, the ever-expanding, constantly shifting box, gives us an edge. The Alarian prosecutor let out a sound like a deflating balloon, a cross between exasperation and bemusement. Very well, but can you demonstrate a practical application of this? Paradoxical thinking. Kane felt the weight of the question, as if Vorath had handed him a live grenade and asked if he could juggle. We can, he said, more confidently than he felt. But we'll need time to prepare a demonstration. Very well, Vorath conceded, the gelatinous prosecutor rippling with what might have been reluctant agreement. Prepare your demonstration. The court will reconvene once you are ready. Kane nodded, hoping the threadbare plan held long enough not to unravel entirely. Thank you, Magistrate Vorath. We look forward to proving ourselves. As they left the courtroom, the tension in Kane's chest gave way to the realization of what they'd promised, a demonstration of humanity's paradoxical genius. No pressure. Back in their cramped office in the bunker, the team reconvened, gathering around a makeshift table that looked ready to collapse under the weight of their collective stress. So, how do we show them our paradox problem-solving without, causing an interstellar incident? Parnell asked, tossing a stress ball between his hands with the dexterity of a bored juggler. Jessamine tapped her fingers on the table, the rhythm matching the frantic pulse of their situation. We need to find an example, something from history that shows humans turning a paradox into a solution. Kane pondered, trying to wade through the chaotic history of humanity like a drunk trying to find his keys after a night out. What about the moon landing? It was a seemingly impossible task, but we made it happen, Parnell grimaced. We're not exactly equipped to launch a rocket from a bunker on Europa. True, Kane admitted, scratching his chin. But we can leverage the concept. Think of something that seemed as improbable as, teaching a cat to play the piano. Jessamine smirked. And do it without getting scratched to hell. They brainstormed, throwing ideas around like confetti at a wedding, each one more ridiculous than the last. But with each absurd suggestion, they got closer to a plan, a demonstration that might just confuse the Alarians enough to consider a different verdict. Finally, Jessamine snapped her fingers. The Trojan horse. Kane tilted his head, the idea bouncing around in his mind like a pinball. Explain. It's a classic example of human creativity in the face of impossible odds, Jessamine said, her eyes gleaming with a mix of mischief and determination. We'll demonstrate how humans can use unconventional tactics to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. Parnell raised an eyebrow. So what, we sneak into their good graces using a giant wooden horse? Jessamine laughed, the sound sharp and clear as a bell in a vacuum. Not literally, but we can create a scenario that mimics the essence of it. Show them how we can adapt and survive by thinking outside the box. Kane nodded, a plan slowly forming in the haze of caffeine and desperation. All right. Let's get to work. The next few days were a blur of activity and frantic preparation, each member of the team pouring their energy into the makeshift project. The bunker buzzed with the energy of their efforts, as if anticipating a conclusion that could tip the scales in their favor. Finally, the day arrived, the moment to present their demonstration to the court. Kane felt the familiar tension coil in his stomach like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap. The courtroom was filled with the usual suspects, alien representatives murmuring amongst themselves, as if betting on the odds of Earth's latest attempt at self-preservation. Vorath floated nearby, his gelatinous form a picture of bureaucratic indifference. Kane took a deep breath and stepped forward. Magistrate Vorath, esteemed members of the court, we present to you a demonstration of human ingenuity, a solution born from chaos. Jessamine activated the holoscreen, and their scenario played out, a simulation of a chaotic battlefield, complete with alien invaders and an outmatched human army. As the battle unfolded, Kane narrated, "Humans excel in situations that seem hopeless. We adapt, we innovate, and when necessary, we deceive for a greater good." The simulation reached its climax, revealing a clever ruse, a feigned retreat that turned the tide of battle, outwitting the seemingly superior alien force through sheer audacity. Parnell leaned in, whispering to Kane, "Let's hope they don't see this as a how-to guide for beating us." Kane smiled, though tension still pulled at his features. "It's the principle that matters." The holoscreen faded to black, leaving the courtroom in a tense silence. Voreth shifted, his eye stalks examining the humans with a mixture of curiosity and something approaching respect. "Interesting," Voreth said finally, his voice a guttural rumble. "Yet, still not proof of your ability to coexist peacefully." Kane nodded, expecting the rebuttal but ready for the next step. "We're not asking to be judged on a single act or demonstration. Humanity is a work in progress, a series of evolving contradictions, but we're committed to finding our place in this galaxy." Voreth's gaze lingered, his form undulating with thought. "You certainly present an intriguing case, Commander Kane. The court will deliberate on this matter." As they left the courtroom, Kane couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope, a faint light in the darkness that suggested maybe, just maybe, they were starting to make progress. Back in the bunker, the team gathered, exhaustion etched into every line of their faces. But beneath the weariness was a sense of accomplishment, a belief that they'd done everything possible to change their fate. "We've given them something to think about," Jessamine said, her voice a mix of relief and determination. Parnell leaned back, his chair creaking dangerously. "Let's hope it's enough. Would hate to go down in history as the band that almost made it." Kane looked at his team, feeling the weight of their collective effort. They'd taken on an impossible task and faced it with humor, creativity, and grit, the true hallmarks of humanity. "Whatever happens," Kane said, his voice steady, "we've shown them who we are, and that's something worth fighting for." As they settled in for the next round of waiting, Kane couldn't help but hope that somewhere, in the tangled web of the universe, their story was just beginning. Back in the bunker, the walls seemed closer than ever. Not that they were closing in, but maybe it was wishful thinking, an excuse to explain the mounting pressure that felt ready to crush them flat as an overcooked pancake. Tivy and Kane stared at the mess of holoscreens and scattered papers, each piece a part of the chaotic puzzle they were trying to solve, like a jigsaw made entirely of straight white pieces. Jessamine was pacing back and forth, her footsteps etching grooves into the concrete. Or maybe it was just the impression she left with her relentless intensity. "We need a breakthrough," she said, her voice slicing through the air like a knife through butter that's been sitting out on a summer day. Parnell, ever the jester in their grim band of misfits, lounged in his chair with the kind of relaxed posture that suggested he either had nerves of steel or was too stubborn to acknowledge the impending doom. "I dunno, Jess. If sheer willpower could summon solutions, you'd have a whole fleet's worth by now." Tyvian grunted in agreement. "The Alarians are tightening the noose. Every day they're sending new documentation, legal this, procedural that. It's like they have a warehouse full of it and just can't bear to see it go to waste." "The downside of dealing with aliens who live longer than the average human's entire lineage," Parnell said with a shrug. "They've got patience out the wazoo." "We need to push back," Jessamine insisted, her fists clenching and unclenching as if she were ready to punch the laws of physics until they gave her what she wanted. "Show them we're not just bumbling around in the dark." "Ah, but Jess, bumbling is what we do best," Parnell replied with a wink that was probably meant to be reassuring but came off as more of a grimace. Meanwhile, Earth's leadership was breathing down their necks harder than a rabid fan at a pop concert. Tyvian had spent more time fielding calls from the brass than he cared to count. Every conversation was the same script. "We need results, Kane." The results being that the Alarians didn't decide to turn Earth into a parking lot for their ludicrous space yachts. The team's secretive research into human paradoxes was less like an organized academic pursuit and more like a mad scientist's fever dream. They dug through every historical oddity and contradiction, hoping to stumble upon a nugget of wisdom that could be their salvation. But so far, all they had was a growing list of humanity's greatest hits, or rather misses. "Is there anything we haven't tried?" Tyvian asked, rubbing his temples as if that might help massage his brain into finding the elusive answer. Jessamir stopped pacing long enough to shoot him a look. "We could always try the Monty Python approach, insult them until they leave us alone." Parnell chuckled. "Pretty sure we'd need to hire a whole new department just to handle the volume of insults required." "Speaking of insults," Jessamir said, eyes narrowing, "let's not forget the Alarians' latest demands. They want us to prove not just our creativity but our capacity for peaceful integration." "As if we haven't spent the last century trying to do just that with each other," Tyvian sighed, the weight of it making him sink deeper into his chair. "They see us as a threat to cosmic stability, and here we are trying to convince them we're not the galactic equivalent of a bull in a china shop. Or a bull in a china galaxy," Parnell added helpfully. The team fell silent again, the lull in conversation underscoring the relentless tick-tock of the clock counting down to their potential annihilation. Outside their bunker, the universe spun on, indifferent to the tiny dramas of humanity. But inside, it was a different story, a story written by the losers of a cosmic lottery. Jessamir finally broke the silence, her voice lower, almost conspiratorial. "We need to pull a new rabbit out of our hat, something they won't expect, if only to remind them we might not be all that predictable, like hiding a bomb inside their favorite dessert," Parnell mused. "Preferably without the explosion part," Tyvian said, raising an eyebrow. "But I get your point." They sat in collective contemplation, the air thick with unspoken thoughts and half-formed plans. In the lawless expanse of space, they were the underdogs, a ragtag group clinging to hope like it might forgive their trespasses. "How about we take this paradox idea a step further?" Tyvian proposed, his eyes lighting up with the spark of a new idea. "I mean, why don't we show them how humans can create harmony out of chaos? We've always managed to find a way to coexist, despite our differences." Jessamir tilted her head, considering. "So, not just the paradox of chaos leading to innovation, but chaos leading to peace." "Exactly," Tyvian said. "We show them that we're more than just a collection of contradictions, that there's a method to our madness." Parnell nodded slowly, as if the idea were a fine wine he was savoring before declaring it palatable. "Okay, I can see that, but how do you plan to prove it? Build a statue of Gandhi out of chocolate and hope it doesn't melt under the Alarian scrutiny," Tyvian chuckled. "Something like that. But first we need to dig deeper, find examples where we've turned chaos into peace." "Back to the historical archives then," Jessamir said, picking up a stack of data chips with a look of renewed determination. "There must be something in our past that we can use as a template. While you're at it, see if you can find a way to trick them into liking us," Parnell quipped. "Maybe throw in a puppy video or two." As the team delved once more into their research, the pressure from both Earth's leadership and the Alarians loomed overhead like a particularly vindictive storm cloud. Each passing moment felt like a countdown to their extinction, a reminder that, at the end of the day, they were just one species among billions, hoping to carve out a little corner of the galaxy to call home. And so they worked, fueled by caffeine, desperation, and the stubborn belief that they might just pull off a miracle. They pored over every data point, every forgotten footnote of history, seeking the elusive proof that would make the Alarians see them as something other than a cosmic nuisance. Hours turned into days, each one a blur of frustration and fleeting hope. The team's determination was tempered by the cold, hard reality of their situation. They were playing a game where the rules were stacked against them, and every move felt like stepping onto a minefield. Finally, Tyvian's fingers brushed over a piece of data that made him pause. It was a record from Earth's history, a time when humanity had managed to find peace amid the chaos. Not by conquering their differences, but by embracing them. "Jessamine," he called, waving her over. "I think I've found something." She leaned in, eyes scanning the text with the intensity of a hawk spotting prey. "What is it?" "Check this out," Tyvian said, pointing to the screen. "The Great Reconciliation Period." After years of conflict, humans managed to form a global alliance by focusing on what united them rather than what divided them. Jessamine's eyes lit up with understanding. "And you think we can use this as our example? Show the Alarians that we can apply the same principles on a galactic scale?" "Exactly," Tyvian replied. "It's not just about resolving conflict. It's about proving that we can adapt our way of thinking to include everyone, even if they are gelatinous and very, very bureaucratic." "Definitely worth a shot," Parnell said, joining them. "Though we might want to jazz it up a bit. Maybe throw in a dance number or two. The more we can demonstrate our ability to adapt and find common ground, the better our chances," Tyvian said, already mapping out the details in his head. "We'll need to tie it into our earlier presentation about the paradox of chaos leading to innovation, and hopefully with a bit more finesse than our previous attempts," Jessamine added dryly. They worked through the night, piecing together a new demonstration that encompassed the spirit of human resilience. It was a testament to their determination, a patchwork of ideas and examples stitched together with the thread of hope. But as dawn approached, the Alarians made their move, sending another mountain of bureaucratic demands that threatened to drown them. Tyvian felt like a swimmer caught in a riptide, struggling to stay afloat in an ocean of legalese. "They're trying to swamp us," Jessamine said, scanning the latest documents with a look of disdain. "Trying to drown us in paperwork until we can't see straight. Probably hoping we'll get fed up and take off," Parnell suggested. "Or maybe just keel over from exhaustion." Tyvian rubbed his eyes, the fatigue weighing heavy. "We can't let them win. Not now. We've come too far." With renewed resolve, they pressed on, determined to meet the Alarians' demands with the same tenacity that had brought them this far. They would not go quietly into the night, not when there was so much left to fight for. As they finalized their presentation, the weight of their task settled over them like a leaden cloak. The stakes were higher than ever, the odds stacked against them. But if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was defying expectations. And so they prepared for the next round, ready to face the Alarians with a defiant smile and a presentation that would hopefully convince them to put down their metaphorical gavel and listen. "Let's hope this works," Tyvian said, glancing at his team. "We're all in now." Jessamine nodded, her expression one of fierce determination. "One way or another, we'll show them what humanity is made of." As they gathered their materials and prepared to present their case, there was a sense of camaraderie, an unspoken bond that spoke of shared struggle and shared hope. Because in the end, they were more than just a group of misfits on the edge of space. They were the embodiment of human resilience, ready to take on the universe. The interstellar court wasn't exactly the Ritz, and certainly not the place you'd want to hold a birthday party unless you really hated the birthday boy. The walls shimmered with iridescent panels, which, combined with the alien representatives, gave the impression of a bad acid trip crossed with a bureaucratic nightmare. Still, this was where humanity's fate hung like a condemned man waiting for the trapdoor to open. Tyvian Kane stood at the center of the circular chamber, flanked by his makeshift crew of misfits, Jessamine, Parnell, and a scattering of other desperate souls hoping to convince Magistrate Vorath that humanity was worth the cosmic headache. No one was particularly optimistic, but desperation has a funny way of making you think that hope might not be entirely extinct. Magistrate Vorath, a gelatinous blob with an air of self-importance that was hard to miss, quivered slightly in his vat of goo. "Present your findings," he gurgled through the translator implant lodged in Tyvian's ear. It translated the alien magistrate's language into something resembling English, though it often felt like a game of intergalactic charades. Tyvian cleared his throat and glanced at Jessamine, who was fiddling with the holoscreen. "All right, so we've been thinking," he began, doing his best to sound confident despite feeling like a kid trying to explain why the dog ate his homework. "You see, humanity has this great knack for turning chaos into peace. We call it the Great Reconciliation, a time when we figured out how to work together instead of tearing each other apart." Jessamir brought up images on the holoscreen, their glow casting strange shadows across the room. Historical footage flickered by, showcasing humans actually getting along for once, a rare feat, like finding a unicorn in a haystack. "During this period, we managed to unite under common goals," Jessamir explained, her voice steady despite the pressure. "We stopped focusing on our differences, instead building a world where collaboration and mutual respect were possible." Parnell piped up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Think of it like a cosmic group hug, minus the awkwardness and forced smiles." The Alarian representatives exchanged glances, their multi-limbed forms twitching with what Tyvian hoped was interest and not derision. Then Magistrate Vorath issued a noise that might have been a laugh but sounded more like a clogged drain. "And you believe this? Reconciliation can be applied on a galactic scale?" Vorath questioned, his tone skeptical enough to make a cynic look like an optimist. Tyvian nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. If we can do it on Earth, where people argue about everything from politics to pineapple on pizza, surely we can extend that spirit across the stars. Assuming, of course, you're willing to look past our colorful history," Jessamir added, pulling up more clips of humans behaving like, well, humans. "We've had our moments, sure, but we've also had breakthroughs." It was a valiant effort, but as Vorath and his cohorts whispered among themselves, Tyvian knew things weren't going as planned. The presentation hung in the air, a precarious balance of hope and resignation. Finally, Vorath turned his attention back to them, and whatever passed for an alien sigh rippled through the chamber. "Your argument is insufficient," he declared, each word like a nail in humanity's coffin. "The Alarian Consortium remains unconvinced of your species' potential for non-chaotic integration." Jessamir's face fell, and Parnell muttered something that sounded suspiciously unprintable. The courtroom's atmosphere thickened, threatening to smother any lingering optimism. This wasn't a setback. It was a full-on derailment, and Tyvian felt the weight of it settle in his gut like lead. "But we showed examples," Jessamir began, only to be cut off by Vorath's dismissive wave. "Examples alone do not dispel the chaos inherent in your kind," Vorath insisted, his words as slippery as his gelatinous form. "You fail to demonstrate a sustained pattern of peace. Chaos, it seems, is your defining trait." The tribunal's decision landed like a gut punch, and for a moment all Tyvian could hear was the pounding of his own heart, loud and insistent. This was supposed to be their ace in the hole, their chance to turn the tide. Instead, they'd walked straight into a dead end. "Goddamn bureaucrats," Parnell whispered, not quite under his breath. "They wouldn't know progress if it bit them in the ass." Tyvian shook his head, frustration gnawing at him. "Back to square one," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We need something stronger, more convincing." The team trudged back to the bunker on Europa, their spirits as low as the temperature outside. Inside, the cramped quarters felt more suffocating than usual, as if the walls themselves were closing in to mock their failure. Jessamir flopped into a chair, her expression grim. "We were so sure that would work. It was our best shot, and now—" Parnell leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Now we're up a creek without a paddle, hoping the Alarians don't decide to pull the plug on us." Tyvian rubbed his temples, hoping to massage out the headache forming there. "We've got to regroup, figure out a new angle, something they can't ignore or dismiss." "Maybe we should just let them see us as chaotic," Jessamir suggested, her voice tinged with sarcasm. "Perhaps they'll finally realize we're too crazy to be a threat. Or maybe they'll just decide we're too crazy to exist," Parnell countered, shooting her a sideways glance. The simmering tension within the group threatened to boil over, each member struggling with their own brand of disillusionment. Tyvian knew they couldn't afford to fracture, not with everything riding on their tenuous unity. "Look," he said, trying to inject some semblance of optimism into his voice. "We've got to keep pushing. We've made it this far, and if nothing else, we're stubborn enough to keep going. We just need to find the right angle to show them we're not the cosmic boogeyman they think we are." Jessamine nodded, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. "Fine. But next time, let's skip the history lesson and go straight for the heart." "Agreed," Tyvian replied, though what exactly that meant was anyone's guess. "Let's get back to work. The clock's ticking and we've got a universe to convince." As they buried themselves once more in their research, the bunker echoed with the sound of fingers on keyboards, punctuated by the occasional frustrated sigh. They were a ragtag team of unlikely heroes, fighting against all odds to save their species from cosmic oblivion. And despite everything, they were determined not to go down without a fight. Hours passed in a haze of caffeine and stubborn defiance, each member of the team grappling with their own personal demons. They were on the edge of a precipice, with nothing but determination and a bit of gallows humor to keep them from falling. Parnell glanced up from his screen, breaking the tense silence. "You know, maybe we should just challenge the Alarians to a dance-off. At least then we'd go out with some style." Jessamine rolled her eyes, though a small smile tugged at her lips. "I'm not sure our moves would impress them." "Probably not," Parnell admitted with a chuckle. "But it'd be worth a try." As the hours dragged on, Tyvian could feel the pressure mounting, a relentless reminder that time was not on their side. But even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, they clung to the one thing that had always set humanity apart: the audacity to dream big, even when the universe insisted on stacking the deck against them. They were a scrappy bunch, fueled by a mix of desperation and stubborn pride. And as long as they had breath in their bodies, they would continue to fight, to prove that chaos in all its unpredictable glory could be a force for good. In the end, it was this tenacity that defined them, the refusal to give up even when the odds were stacked a mile high. And as they worked late into the night, each member of the team knew that the story wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. Because in the vast, indifferent expanse of space, they were more than just a collection of chaotic souls. They were humanity, flawed, unpredictable, and infinitely resilient. And if anyone could find a way to turn chaos into peace, it was them. With the weight of the universe on their shoulders, they forged ahead, determined to prove that even in the darkest hour, there was always a glimmer of light waiting to be found. Tyvian Kane just hoped that light wouldn't turn out to be an oncoming train. In the dimly lit recesses of the Europa bunker, where hope often felt like a distant cousin you couldn't remember the name of, Tyvian Kane and his band of misfit interstellar diplomats wrestled with their latest defeat. The weight of the Alarian Tribunal's decision hung over them, a bleak reminder that human charm was about as effective as a wet match in a vacuum. "Okay, so we got our asses handed to us," Tyvian declared, breaking the silence with the finesse of a bull in a pottery barn. "But we're not dead yet, right? There's still time to pull a proverbial rabbit out of our hat." "Sure," Jessamine quipped, eyes glued to her holoscreen where she was presumably plotting some kind of miraculous comeback. "If by rabbit you mean a half-baked idea that barely holds water." Parnell snorted from his perch in the corner, where he'd managed to find the only chair that creaked more than his knees. "Well, we could always send them a fruit basket. That might sweeten the deal." "Yes, because nothing says we're not chaotic like an overpriced assortment of alien pomelos," Jessamine retorted, rolling her eyes. Amidst the cynical banter, a sound cut through the air, a timid clearing of the throat that could have easily been mistaken for a malfunctioning air vent. All eyes turned to Lyra Voss, the intern who'd been shadowing the team with the kind of enthusiasm you usually only saw in cult meetings. Excuse me," Lyra began, her voice wavering like a tightrope walker with vertigo. "I think I might have an idea. Tyvian raised an eyebrow, intrigued if only by the sheer audacity of youth. Do tell, Lyra. At this point, I'll take suggestions from a sentient toaster if it gets us anywhere. Lyra hesitated, clearly battling the urge to run for the hills or whatever counted for them on Europa. But she stood her ground, taking a deep breath before launching into her pitch. What if? What if we embrace the chaos? Embrace it, Jessamine repeated, her skepticism palpable. And how exactly does letting our freak flag fly win over a bunch of alien bureaucrats? Well, think about it, Lyra continued, warming to her theme. The Alarians see chaos as a threat, right? But what if we could prove that our chaos isn't random, it's actually productive, like a paradoxical force that drives innovation and problem-solving? Tyvian rubbed his chin, mulling over the idea. So you're saying we convince them that our chaos is actually a strategic asset, not a liability? Exactly, Lyra nodded, gaining confidence. It's like harnessing the storm to power the city. We show them that out of chaos we create progress. Parnell whistled low, an impressed grin spreading across his face. I'll be damned. That's either the most brilliant or the most insane thing I've ever heard. Or both, Tyvian added, a newfound spark of hope flickering to life. And since we're out of options, I'll take brilliant insanity over certain doom any day. Jessamine leaned back in her chair, contemplating the proposal. It's risky, but it might just be crazy enough to work. If we can present chaos as a controlled factor rather than an uncontrolled variable, it could shift the narrative. Controlled chaos, Parnell mused. Sounds like the name of a bar I used to frequent. You mean the one that got shut down for fire code violations? Jessamine shot back with a smirk. Details, Parnell dismissed, waving a hand. Tyvian clapped his hands together, the sound echoing through the bunker like a starting pistol. All right, team, let's work this out. We need to frame chaos as a catalyst for innovation and resilience, something the Alarians can't just brush off. Lyra beamed, her relief evident. For the first time, she wasn't just the intern fetching coffee and filing reports. She was an integral part of the team, and her contribution might just tip the scales. The Iors flew by as they brainstormed, pulling together examples and evidence to support Lyra's theory. Tyvian was in his element, leading the charge with a renewed vigor that bordered on insanity. Jessamine and Parnell fell into step, their skepticism giving way to cautious optimism. What about the time humans used that asteroid to create a new power source? Jessamine suggested, typing furiously on her holoscreen. Perfect, Tyvian agreed. That was pure chaos in motion. We took something destructive and made it work for us. Like turning lemons into lemonade, Parnell said with a grin. Except in this case, the lemons are giant space rocks hurtling through the void. Exactly, Lyra chimed in. And we've got plenty more examples where that came from. We just need to package it all up in a way that makes sense to the Alarians. Which is code for in a way that doesn't make their heads explode, Tyvian noted dryly. No pressure. As they refined their presentation, the atmosphere in the bunker slowly shifted from despair to determination. It was as if they'd collectively decided to flip the universe the bird and forge their own destiny. Chaos be damned. Let's focus on the great reconciliation, Tyvian instructed, pacing the room like a general preparing for battle. That was a prime example of humanity turning chaos into something positive. And the tech boom that followed, Jessamine added. We pushed through the chaos and came out stronger. Controlled chaos, Lyra echoed, the term taking on a life of its own. We'll make them see it as our greatest strength. The clock was ticking, each second a countdown to their next encounter with the Alarian tribunal. But this time they weren't going in empty-handed. They had a plan, a purpose, and most importantly, a glimmer of hope. Tyvian felt the weariness of the past few days lift ever so slightly. They were still standing on the edge, but now they had a safety net. A precarious one, sure, but a net nonetheless. Remember, Tyvian said, addressing the team with a nod of encouragement. We may be chaotic, but we're not without potential. We've got a chance to show the universe what we're really made of. And if they still don't buy it, Parnell asked, his tone light despite the gravity of the situation. Then we aim for the dance-off, Jessamir joked, eliciting a round of laughter from the group. With their preparations in place, they gathered in the bunker's central chamber, ready to face the tribunal one last time. They were a motley crew, united by a shared purpose and a refusal to accept defeat. As the holoscreens flickered to life, connecting them to the Alarian court, Tyvian took a deep breath. The stakes were higher than ever, but this time they had an ace up their sleeve, a bold, paradoxical theory that just might save them all. "Ready, team?" Tyvian asked, his gaze sweeping over each member of the group. "Bring it on," Jessamir replied, her eyes shining with determination. "Let's show them what humanity's really about," Parnell added, crossing his arms with a confident grin. "And if all else fails," Lyra said, a mischievous glint in her eyes, "we can always send that fruit basket." The laughter that followed was genuine, a shared moment of camaraderie that reminded them they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future where humanity's unique brand of chaos was seen as a force for good. As their image appeared before the tribunal, Tyvian squared his shoulders and prepared to deliver the performance of a lifetime. This was it, their last stand, and with any luck, it wouldn't end in a fiery blaze but in a triumphant roar that echoed across the stars. "Magistrate Vorath," Tyvian began, his voice steady. "We're back with a new perspective, one that embraces the very thing you fear." In the next room, Jessamir initiated their montage, a series of clips illustrating humanity's knack for thriving amidst chaos. Each scene was a testament to Lyra's theory, a vivid reminder that chaos, when harnessed, could be a powerful tool. "We propose that chaos is not our flaw but our strength," Tyvian continued, his words echoing with conviction. "It's what drives us to innovate, adapt, and overcome." The tribunal watched, their reactions inscrutable, as images of human ingenuity played across the holoscreen. It was a gamble, but one they were willing to take. "For every disaster there is an opportunity," Jessamir chimed in, switching to footage of humanity rebuilding from the ashes of past mistakes. "We learn, we grow, and we evolve. And while our methods may seem unorthodox," Parnell added, his tone laced with humor, "there's an undeniable logic to our madness." Lyra watched the presentation unfold, her heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and hope. This was her idea, the spark that could ignite a revolution or fizzle out in spectacular fashion. "And in embracing our chaos," Tyvian concluded, "we can offer the universe a new perspective, one that values adaptability and resilience above all else." The room was silent as their words hung in the air, the tension palpable. Tyvian resisted the urge to fidget, instead maintaining eye contact with the magistrate, willing him to see the truth in their argument. Finally, Vorath spoke, his gelatinous form quivering in his vat. "Your proposal is intriguing," he admitted, a hint of curiosity in his tone. "Yet it remains to be seen if such controlled chaos is viable on a galactic scale." Tyvian nodded, acknowledging the challenge. "We're willing to prove it, given the chance." As the tribunal deliberated, the team held their breath, waiting for the verdict that would determine their fate. It was a long shot, but they'd faced worse odds before. The silence was broken by Vorath's gurgling voice. "The Alarian Consortium will consider your proposal further. However, the final ruling is yet to be made." A collective sigh of relief swept through the team, a tentative victory in a game that was far from over. They'd bought themselves time, a chance to refine their strategy and continue their fight. As the connection cut, leaving them once more in the dim confines of the bunker, Tyvian allowed himself a small smile. They'd managed to turn chaos into hope, an outcome as unexpected as it was exhilarating. "Well, that went better than expected," Parnell remarked, clapping Lyra on the back. "Nice work, kid." Jessamir nodded in agreement, her expression softening. "Looks like we might just pull this off after all." "One step at a time," Tyvian cautioned, though his eyes betrayed his optimism. "We've got a long way to go." As they regrouped to plan their next move, the bunker buzzed with renewed energy. They were a team bound by shared purpose and defiance, determined to carve out a future where chaos reigned not as a curse, but as a beacon of possibility. Lyra, now an integral part of the effort, felt a surge of pride. She'd taken a risk, and it had paid off, giving them a fighting chance against the odds. And as the night wore on, filled with laughter and banter, the Europa bunker felt a little less like a coffin and a little more like home, a place where chaos was not just accepted, but celebrated. The courtroom was as stuffy as a bureaucrat's sock drawer. The air hung heavy with the scent of judgment and old coffee, an olfactory reminder that this was no place for the faint-hearted. Tyvian Kane stood at the center, his team flanking him like a ragtag squad of misfit Avengers. Only this time there were no capes, just a lot of caffeine and a shared disdain for cosmic red tape. Jessamir, her holoscreen flashing with last-minute tweaks, leaned over to whisper, "Bet Vorath's more gelatin than magistrate today." Tyvian caught the grin she was trying to hide. "Jello in a jar, Jess. Just try not to slurp while he's talking." In the gallery, Magistrate Vorath's vat glimmered, a quivering mass of self-importance. Around the room, the Ilarian jury, each one looking more like an artist's fevered dream than the next, shifted in their seats. Ready or not, this was showtime. "Let's make some cosmic noise," Parnell muttered, cracking his knuckles. The old man was creaky, but he wore defiance like a second skin. The tribunal's attention snapped to the team as Tyvian began. "Honorable Magistrate Vorath, esteemed members of the tribunal," he started, laying on the charm like it was mustard on a stale sandwich. "We appreciate the opportunity to present our case once more." Vorath's voice burbled through the translator, sounding like a bathtub drain with a PhD. "Proceed with your unique perspective, Mr. Kane." Tyvian nodded at Lyra, who initiated the montage. On the holoscreens, scenes of humanity's most chaotic yet oddly inspiring moments played out. Cities rising from rubble, asteroids turned into powerhouses, and a particularly bold clip of some ancient Earth leader moonwalking to world peace. "And there it is, folks," Parnell quipped, "the grand tour of human ingenuity. Strap in, it only gets weirder." Jessamir's fingers danced over her holoscreen, pulling up the next sequence. "Our history is a testament to turning chaos into opportunity," she said, shooting Parnell a look that dared him to call her out on using testament. "We don't just survive chaos, we thrive in it." Vorath's interest was palpable, or maybe that was just the new air conditioning. Either way, it was time to kick this up a notch. Tyvian took a deep breath. "What we propose," he said, "is to embrace what you deem unpredictable. Humanity's chaos isn't a defect, it's our greatest asset. It's what drives us to innovate, adapt, and find solutions that logic alone can't reach. It's like jazz, only with more explosions." "Chaos," Lyra chimed in, her voice steady despite the stakes, "isn't just our method, it's our madness. And therein lies our potential." The tribunal members exchanged glances, their expressions as inscrutable as a poker face in a cosmic game. Even the notoriously unreadable Zoglin seemed intrigued, their eye stalks quivering with unexpected attention. Tyvian continued, his voice rising with conviction. "Through chaos, we've achieved the unthinkable. We've created order from disorder and turned threats into opportunities. And occasionally," Jessamir interjected with a wry smile, "we've managed to not blow ourselves up in the process. Mostly." The room erupted in a chorus of alien chuckles, which sounded suspiciously like a bag of cats being strangled. Tyvian took that as a good sign, or at least not a bad one. Magistrate Vorath's form quivered with what could only be described as curiosity or perhaps indigestion. "Your proposal challenges conventional understanding," Vorath admitted. "Yet it possesses a peculiar logic." "That's the thing about logic," Parnell grinned, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "It's never been our strong suit, but we've got a knack for making it work eventually." The tribunal members leaned forward, their collective curiosity piqued. Tyvian sensed the shift, an intangible change in the cosmic winds. They had them on the hook now to reel them in. Imagine, Tyvian said, spreading his arms wide, a universe where chaos is not feared but harnessed, where adaptability and resilience are the cornerstones of progress, where humans are not seen as the cosmic janitors, Jessamir added, but as pioneers of potential. And if nothing else, Parnell chimed in, his grin infectious, we promised to keep things interesting. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Each member of the tribunal weighed their words, their collective minds whirring away as they processed the presentation. Finally, Vorath broke the silence, his voice a gurgling sigh. The Alarian Consortium will deliberate on your proposal, taking into account the unconventional merits you have outlined. Tyvian nodded, maintaining an air of confidence even as his heart tried to stage a drum solo in his chest. We appreciate your consideration. The connection to the tribunal flickered out, leaving the bunker in a state of suspended animation. The tension in the room was palpable, the team collectively holding their breath as they awaited the verdict. When Vorath's voice rang out once more, it was like a lifeline tossed into their sea of uncertainty. The tribunal has reached a preliminary conclusion. We acknowledge the potential value of humanity's unique contributions to cosmic affairs. A collective exhale swept through the team, the relief almost palpable. They'd done it, or at least, they'd made it over the first hurdle without anyone ending up as space debris. And thus, Vorath concluded, the court provisionally rules in favor of humanity, pending further review. We recognize Earth as a source of potential innovation, albeit with caution. The words hung in the air, a declaration that felt as surreal as it was hard-won. Tyvian allowed himself a brief moment of triumph, stealing a glance at his team. Jessamir, ever the strategist, now wore a smile that spoke of hard-earned victory. Parnell, the old warhorse, clapped Tyvian on the back with a grin that could light up a supernova. Lyra, their secret weapon, stood proud, her eyes alight with the fire of possibility. Well, Parnell said, breaking the silence with his trademark irreverence, guess we'll have to save the fruit basket for another day. Jessamir laughed, the sound like music in the echoing space. Who knew chaos could be so profitable? Tyvian shrugged, feigning nonchalance. We all did, Jess. That's why we're here. As they regrouped in their cramped yet comfortingly familiar bunker, the air buzzed with renewed energy. They'd taken the first step in a journey that stretched across the stars, proving the power of human ingenuity and chaos. Lyra, no longer just the intern but a vital part of their success, felt a surge of pride and purpose. She'd taken a gamble, and it had paid off in ways she could barely comprehend. Parnell, settling back into his chair with a groan and a sigh, summed up the mood with characteristic bluntness. Looks like we managed to stick it to the cosmic man, at least for now. Tyvian chuckled, feeling the weight of the universe lightening ever so slightly. Yeah, but don't get too comfy. We've got a lot of work ahead. Jessamir smirked, her fingers already flying over her holoscreen as she mapped out their next move. And here I was hoping for a nice, boring week. Boring's not in our vocabulary, Tyvian shot back, the corners of his mouth twitching upwards. We've got chaos to manage and a universe to surprise. As the night deepened, the team remained, plotting, laughing, and relishing their small victory. They'd bought themselves time to refine their arguments, strengthen their case, and show the galaxy just what humanity was capable of. And as the Europa bunker hummed with life and laughter, it became clear that they were more than just a team of diplomats and strategists. They were the embodiment of humanity's chaotic spirit, a force of nature ready to carve their own path through the cosmos. The stakes were high, the challenges immense, but for the first time, they dared to hope that chaos might just be the answer they'd been looking for all along. As long as they had each other, and a healthy disregard for the rules, they were ready to face whatever the universe threw their way. To chaos, Jessamir toasted, raising an imaginary glass. To chaos, they echoed, their voices harmonizing in a chorus of defiance and hope. The tension that had filled the Europa bunker like stale air began to dissipate, replaced by a palpable sense of victory. The tribunal's decision had come through, and though it wasn't permanent, it was a win. Humanity had managed to slip the noose, at least for the time being. Tyvian Kane, the man who could charm misfortune itself, let out a long, slow breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Well, that went better than expected," he said, trying to sound casual while his insides did a jitterbug. Jessamir, always the realist with a side of snark, tapped away on her holoscreen, her focus already shifting to the next steps. "Don't start patting yourself on the back too hard, Tiv. We're not heroes yet, more like temporarily tolerated nuisances." "Heroes are overrated anyway," Tyvian replied, a smirk playing on his lips. "Too much pressure. We just need to be slightly less annoying than the other guys." Lyra Voss, no longer just the plucky intern but an integral part of their ragtag team, was practically glowing. "I can't believe it. We actually made them listen." Parnell, the old-timer whose experience was matched only by his irreverence, snorted. "Listen, sure, agree. That's a whole different kettle of alien fish. But hey, credit where it's due, you did good, kid." Lyra beamed, her enthusiasm infectious. "Thanks, Parnell. I mean, it's not every day you get to save your species from galactic irrelevance." "Just remember," Jessamir cut in, eyes still glued to her screen, "this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. We've still got to navigate a universe full of beings who think we're one bad day away from self-destruction." "Which we are," Parnell added with a grin. "But that's part of our charm, right?" Tyvian shook his head, the familiar weight of leadership settling back onto his shoulders. "Charming as a cactus in a sandstorm, but it's true. We've got to keep pushing, keep proving we're worth the cosmic trouble." Lyra nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "It's strange, isn't it? Chaos is messy, unpredictable, but it's also an opportunity." Tyvian glanced at her, impressed by the insight. "That's right. It's a double-edged sword. Cuts both ways, but if you know how to wield it, you can carve out a future." Parnell leaned back, his chair creaking under the strain of too many years and too many battles. "Speaking of carving out futures, what's the plan now, fearless leader?" Tyvian considered the question, the weight of responsibility pressing down like Europa's icy surface. They'd bought some time, but the galaxy was a vast, uncharted expanse full of dangers and opportunities. "We strengthen our alliances. Show the universe what humanity can do when we're not busy blowing things up, or ourselves," Jessamir added dryly, her fingers never slowing on the holoscreen. "A little less self-destruction could go a long way." "Agreed." Tyvian turned to Lyra, a new respect in his gaze. "And Lyra, I want you leading our outreach initiatives. You've shown you've got what it takes." Lyra's eyes widened, the weight of the responsibility both thrilling and terrifying. "Me? Really? Why not?" Tyvian replied, a hint of mischief in his voice. "You're the one who got us here. Besides, the universe needs a little more unpredictability." "Just make sure it's the good kind," Jessamir said, finally looking up from her work, her gaze steady and supportive. Parnell raised an imaginary glass, the gesture as meaningful as any official toast. "To unpredictability and the universe's tolerance for it." "To unpredictability," they echoed, a chorus of defiance and hope. Despite the looming challenges, there was a sense of camaraderie, a bond forged in the fires of chaos and uncertainty. They'd faced the abyss and hadn't flinched. Well, at least not too much. The Europa bunker, despite its grim and confining nature, now felt like a haven. A place where ideas could be born, nurtured, and sent out to change the stars. Whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together, armed with nothing more than their wits, a touch of insanity, and the irrepressible spirit of humanity. As the team settled in for a long night of planning and strategizing, Parnell summed up their situation with his usual flair for sarcasm. "So, what do we call ourselves? The Galactic Chaos Committee, the Order of the Cosmic Clowns. How about the League of Slightly Less Mad?" Jessamir suggested, her eyes twinkling with humor. "I kind of like cosmic clowns," Lyra admitted, her smile wide. "Anything but committee," Tyvian said with mock horror. "We're not that desperate yet." They laughed, the sound echoing off the walls of the bunker, a testament to their resilience and their refusal to be beaten down by the universe's indifference. "Whatever we call ourselves, let's make sure they remember it," Tyvian said, his voice firm with determination. "Let's make sure they remember us." And with that they got back to work, their minds buzzing with ideas, their hearts full of the reckless courage that had brought them this far. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with challenges, but that was fine. They thrived in chaos, made it their ally and their weapon. As the hours stretched into the small, quiet moments of the night, Tyvian found himself watching his team, his friends, with a sense of deep gratitude. They might be an odd bunch, each carrying their own scars and stories, but together they were formidable. Lyra, now fully integrated into the team's dynamic, was already bouncing ideas back and forth with Jessamir, their heads together over a holoscreen filled with plans and projections. Parnell, ever the stalwart, was offering his own brand of grizzled wisdom, his voice a comforting presence amid the uncertainty. And Tyvian, who'd once been just another cog in the bureaucratic machine, now stood at the helm of something extraordinary. They were doing what no one else had thought possible, turning humanity's greatest weaknesses into its most potent strengths. The tribunal's provisional ruling gave them a window, and they would use it to build, to adapt, and to surprise the galaxy with what humanity could achieve. They would embrace the chaos, wield it with precision, and show the universe that unpredictability was not something to fear, but to celebrate. As the night wore on, fatigue began to tug at the edges of their minds, but the determination burned brighter. They were on the cusp of something great, something that had the potential to redefine humanity's place among the stars. "Do you think they'll ever really accept us?" Lyra asked, her voice soft but tinged with the steel of resolve. Tyvian considered the question, his gaze drifting to the stars beyond the bunker's reinforced windows. "Maybe, maybe not, but that's not what matters. What matters is that we keep proving we belong, and that we don't take no for an answer," Jessamir added, her tone fierce. "Exactly," Tyvian agreed, a smile in his voice. "We keep pushing, keep fighting, and one day they won't be able to ignore us." Lyra nodded, the fire in her eyes mirrored in the hearts of her teammates. "Then let's get to work." And they did, their laughter mingling with the hum of technology, their ideas taking shape in the dim light of the bunker. They were more than just a team, they were a force, a movement, the embodiment of humanity's indomitable spirit. As the first hints of dawn began to seep into the bunker, weary but unbowed, they paused to take stock of what they'd accomplished. It wasn't just a victory, it was a promise, a declaration of intent to the cosmos that humanity was here to stay. The path ahead was daunting, filled with unknowns and potential pitfalls, but they were ready. Ready to face the challenges, to seize the opportunities, and to carve out a new future for Earth among the stars. "Here's to the future," Tyvian said, raising his hand in a gesture of unity and purpose. "To the future," they echoed, their voices strong, their hearts full of hope and defiance. And as they turned once more to the task at hand, the Europa bunker bustling with energy and ambition, they knew they were on the brink of something extraordinary. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but so were they. Together, they would navigate the stars, proving that chaos was not a curse but a blessing, and that humanity, in all its beautiful madness, was a force to be reckoned with. For in the end, it was chaos that made them who they were, and it was chaos that would propel them into the future. A future that, for the first time in a long while, looked bright.